and then have the other two people will be assisting and covering different parts of the presentation this morning introduce themselves if you'd like, and then we'll jump right into some of our discussion for today and some of the training. So my name is Eric Von Ness. I'm the lead administrator for Free Through Recovery, and I'm based out of Minot and serve supervising our team of FTR admins and working together with Dr. Peterson and Yvette Anderson to continue to develop and improve Free Through Recovery. So Heather or Lisa, if either one of you.
Hi, good morning all. My name's Heather Brandt. I'm with the North Dakota Behavioral Health Division, working to implement and lead a project with Community Connect, the expansion of Free Through Recovery. Good to see you all.
Hi, I'm Lisa Peterson. I'm a psychologist and clinical director with the DOCR. I'm not sure Yvette is on, but Eric mentioned her, and I just wanted to make sure and kind of announce, if you hadn't heard yet, that Yvette Anderson was hired as a Free Through Recovery clinical administrator. So you will be meeting her, albeit probably virtually, over the next couple months, and she will be taking on many of the day-to-day operations of FTR as far as the DOCR role and responsibilities. Thanks.
Well, thank you, and we're going to jump in and just cover a couple topics today. We wanted to start off talking about the kind of some of the keys to the process of referrals. This is a joint effort between our two departments to meet these behavioral health needs and care coordination needs for the participants that you as probation officers identify. So I'll cover a couple things here, and then Dr. Peterson too, just chime in and with things. Obviously, you oversee this from the DOCR perspective, and so I guess one of the key things is I want to thank the POs. When we think of the we're approaching 3,000 different participants that have been served through the life of the program. It's the work that you guys do out there identifying these people that may benefit from these services and then making that referral process. And I know that it's some extra effort on your part to do that, but it's just essential. You guys get a view into their case and into the barriers and challenges that they have ahead of them, and so your summary and your referral into Free Through Recovery is just a key and appreciated first step as we identify these people all over the state. So. The second part of this is that the providers are responsible to give us a summary of who they are as a provider, and our goal is that you're presenting that to the participants and giving them an opportunity to choose their provider. And I just kind of want to make it clear on that it's not us, like we as the Behavioral Health Division are not promoting any specific providers or don't take on that responsibility of marketing and whatever. We also don't promise a certain number of referrals to any particular provider. This is participant centered and participant choice. So we just try to clarify that, because sometimes you may have someone who calls you or says, why am I not getting referrals, as if either you as the probation officers or us as a behavioral health division are balancing and distributing those equally or something. We just try to communicate consistently that it is participant choice, and I think that's a good thing. Some of you as probation officers have some care coordinators that you've worked with that are just rock stars. They do a great job and they communicate well with you, and so, it's easy to see why those are obviously going to be someone who you would recommend because you've seen the type of work that they do. And but we want to make sure that we're honoring that, participant choice and keeping that centered. So, Lisa, from your perspective, what are any other things that you would identify as keys for on the Department of Corrections side to the referral process?
I don't think so. I mean, I just want to be clear, though, that we are accepting referrals. We are able to admit pretty much everybody who wants to participate in Free Through Recovery into the program at this point. I think many of you know this, but we had decided to set our census at 1,000 participants for the remainder of this biennium. And so I haven't checked recently, but last time I did look, we were around 950. And so usually we process enough discharges in a given week to be able to, like I said, process referrals now at this point as soon as they come in. So just please do consider Free Through Recovery for your clients, and don't, assume that we're full or that they won't be able to get in. We are still prioritizing, of course, higher risk and need folks, but if you have a person whose LSI score doesn't match, but they have a significant level of behavioral health need, we are able to admit them.
Well, one thing we wanted to process together too is that one of the challenges with Free Through Recovery is getting the participants engaged with their care coordinator well right from the beginning. Kind of that first 90 to 100-day period after they're referred into the program. And so I in talking to Yvette Anderson yesterday, our new clinical administrator, we were discussing that quite a bit about what could be some of our goals of researching and understanding better how to improve and get some ideas for that initial engagement. In other words, there's times where one of you will do a great job, get the referral through, and then all of a sudden there's this gap, like the care coordinator is trying to contact them and trying to engage. And here we are 2 months in, 3 months in. If we reach that 3-month mark and there's still no engagement, most likely we're discharging them. And so what we'd like to do is get some of your all's input from your perspective and some ideas for that initial engagement. How can we improve that and work together? So if you have any thoughts here as we're bringing this up, either speak up or type them into the chat box, and Heather or Kelly or one of our team members will make sure that we all see those and read them out loud. But what are some ideas that you've seen that have been effective to get those participants connected well with their care coordinator or understanding the program well? Have there been any practices or things that you've done that have seemed to help your participants jump into that and really use this service that is to their benefit? I'll use one example, I guess, that was presented the first round that we did with the probation officers. One officer mentioned that she had just started having a meeting with the participant in her office and the care coordinator. So there would be a warm handoff. So after they had determined kind of who they were going to work with in the next meeting, they had the care coordinator come there and sit with the three of them to kind of get that, to have that warm handoff and help assist with that engagement. So any other ideas that you guys have seen that would help when you're talking and you're sitting there with that probationer in front of your desk, and, or I should say, maybe they're staying on the other side of your car. I shouldn't say in front of your desk. There's so many different ways that we're having to try to meet right now. But what would be helpful to assist you in that first step of engaging and leading the discussion about Free Through Recovery? Any tools or things that you think would be helpful or that you've tried and have been very effective? This is an out loud part, so you like put it in the chat box or you speak up or whatever. So just making sure.
Kind of waiting for other people to chime in here, but during our last training, some people talked about having a meeting together for that first meeting, or different strategies that different officers have implemented. So if you guys have anything like that that's worked for you, we'd really like to hear from you and just really continue to spread those ideas to each other.
One thing we want to keep working on as well for clients who are transitioning from prison is to set up opportunities for them to meet with their care coordinator before they leave the prison. I know when we have been able to do that, it seems like it's been very helpful for the participant to establish that rapport and relationship, when they're in a setting where they don't necessarily have some of the stressors and barriers that they would have once they're back in their home community. So we will continue to work on that, especially now that virtual meetings have become a lot more commonplace. I think we have an opportunity there to really improve that in reach into the facilities.
The one idea that was being bounced around a little bit, and we've gotten a little bit of feedback from a couple of POs, so I'd appreciate if some of you can help us process this today. There was a discussion about trying to create, let's say, like a 2-minute video type thing that would be used. It would be accessible through your on your computer if you're in your office, but also we would have links where it'd be easy to use on a smartphone. So if you're meeting with someone outside of the office, when you come to the point of wanting to kind of say, hey, would you like to be involved with Free Through Recovery? Then at that point, you would just show them this. And it would be something that we would, produce that would briefly kind of take that responsibility and explain Free Through Recovery, how it works, what their next steps would be. And then it would be a way for you as a probation officer to not feel like you're trying to explain and sell Free Through Recovery to this person, but that you'd be able to say, I think this would be beneficial to you. Let's take a minute or two. Would you be willing to watch this and see if this is something that you would like to participate in? So I guess the question out of that is, do you think that would be helpful? Would that be a tool that would be helpful when you're sitting with that participant or when you're out somewhere with that participant? Would that be worth us producing? And would you find it a resource that would be helpful in the process?
This is Jen with the Bismarck office. I guess personally, I've had good luck just showing them the brochure and kind of walking them through what the program offers and the support that can be offered through the program. I don't know, I'm not saying that a video wouldn't be beneficial, but it seems to me that the brochure alone combined with me explaining it has been beneficial.
Okay. Thank you, Jen.
I think the biggest questions that come up when I have referred people is who offers what, this is what I'm looking for, and that sort of thing. So that handout with what each agency is willing to assist with or what services they can provide is the most helpful. Because overall, I guess the goal of the program and explaining it isn't too difficult, I don't think. So even if it was just, like narrowing down, these are the services that have been offered in the past and that sort of thing, that's typically what they want to know.
Great. Yeah, that's helpful. Well, and that might be something that we're trying to explain too, is that remember, really all of the providers are responsible to cover the same thing as far as their job is to care coordinate. So even if it's not something that their organization specializes in, their responsibility is to find those services, connect that participant to those services. So I'll use, like, let's say community options, whose specialty might be more of some of the employment side of things, and yet this person's needs are housing or recovery, some type of treatment, then the care coordinator's job is not just to provide what their organization does as their niche. Their job is to connect them and be that glue that kind of pulls all those resources together for that participant. And so we're trying to emphasize that, because sometimes there's this impression that, that when they choose a provider, they're only going to get the services that providing agency offers as their niche service. Care coordination involves, sure, whatever they do as their main thing, but then their job is to connect them to other things. If it means referring to another organization, connecting to another FTR provider or another resource in the community, that's what the care coordinator needs to be doing. So we do a lot of training on that and trying to communicate that. But thank you for your input. These comments and chat things are helpful. So okay. All right, well, we'll look into that some more, and we'll just keep this line open afterwards. If you have and want to shoot us an email, if you have any other thoughts on this, or next time maybe you're sitting with a participant, something comes to mind, please shoot that to me in an email or to Dr. Peterson. We really want to kind of develop and not miss that first 90 to 100 days. Once you guys have done the work of filling out the stuff for a referral, we really want to try to have a warm handoff there and have early engagement so that that we can see as many barriers overcome as possible, especially in that first 3 months. So we'll go ahead and move on to some of our next topic. That here I want to talk a little bit about transfers. Just to clarify, we have intentionally designed the transfer process to be handled through a probation officer if the person is on supervision, or through our FTR admins if the person is off supervision. I will say that if they are still on and you need assistance with it, our admins, can help in any way there. So feel free to reach out to them. But if a participant initiates and says they want to transfer, or we hear anything about that, it's very intentional that we move that back to the POs or our FTR admins to make sure that one reason is that the person's choice is protected there. We've had some situations where providers feel like they're losing I hate to put it this way, but kind of they're losing a customer or whatever. They don't want to turn a participant over, and yet that participant really doesn't want to work with them anymore. And so we really want to keep the providers out of that transfer process, so that we're making sure that that participant is going to a place that they want to and are going to engage. Just kind of want to explain why we do that. So if you get a call or there's a person that wants to transfer, the reason we're pitching those back to the POs is so that it can be handled objectively there by someone who's not, one of the providers involved. And then we can get releases signed so that whatever conversations and things are covered under the releases that you obtain while they're in your presence or in your office. So any questions or thoughts on the transfers? All right. Well, we'll have a Q&A time at the end too if there's anything that comes up. But the main priority for today is to talk a little bit about levels. This is a new thing that we've implemented in Free Through Recovery. They basically went live December 21st, and so you're going to start seeing levels. First of all, if you look on that first page of in DocStars, you'll see a person's level. It'll be called like L3, L2, L1, and those levels were developed for several reasons that we'll talk about here. Number one is that we want to be able to be person-centered with care coordination and design it differently for each different participant. There may be a participant who it changes even during the time that they're in Free Through Recovery. They start off needing level 3, which is what everyone is when they come in, needing the intensity of services and care coordinator working with them multiple times a week, let's say. But then they get a job or they get a place to live, and now they're working, let's say out in the oil field or something, and they don't have time to meet with more people. They need to meet with their PO regularly, and then they want to cut down to only meeting twice a month or once a month. But they're doing well and we have good outcomes showing and things like that, then that's where we want to be able to adjust the level and be person-centered based on how that individual is doing. We also see a variety of different responses once they're off supervision or once they have all positive outcomes and they feel that their immediate needs are met. We have some who say, hey, I'm good, thank you, appreciate it, and they're on their way. We have others who feel like they're still fearful of maybe relapsing or things falling apart, and they want to keep that support close by. And even though maybe they've been in Free Through Recovery for a year and a half, 2 years, whatever. So what this allows us to do is then adjust that level down and keep them in the program so that they have a resource available if needed. So all of this came out of us as a team working to answer the question of when is someone discharged from Free Through Recovery. And I think one thing we want to highlight there is it's not a set amount of time. It's not just when they're off supervision. It's not 6 months, a year, or whatever. We adjust it according to what we as a care team and what the participant have identified as their needs. Because ultimately, the reality is, even though it costs us some to keep someone in the program, let's say $6,000 a year or whatever, that is pretty minimal compared to what it costs if they go back with additional charges, are incarcerated again, or having to be supervised again, back on, so we literally could have someone in the program for, let's say, 5 to 7 years for the cost of what, and that's just looking at the physical side of it, much less the impact of them having a healthy and productive life and not harming others or themselves and things like that. So the ability to make this person-centered and adjust the time according to the needs of that participant is essential. So one thing that we've seen, the last point there, bullet point on the PowerPoint, talks about giving the participant who is off supervision a place to turn for help without new law enforcement involvement. We've seen this quite a few times now that the program's been going for a while. I'll see quite a few people that were referred in like, let's say early 2019. So they've been in the program now for about 2 years. Outcomes were looking really good. They were off supervision and only meeting with their care coordinator, let's say just for a brief check-in or once a month. And yet then something happened, a relapse of some kind, some type of event, and now they need help. And what we like to see is that many of them are then calling that care coordinator and saying, things are going bad again, and then the care coordinator can re-engage at 100%, like at that level 3, and that's the goal, that they have a resource like that to turn to instead of waiting until there's additional charges or they're back on supervision, to have a place to turn. So these are some of the reasons why we created these levels. So I already highlighted kind of the purpose of this, but the process is that all participants referred into Free Through Recovery will start at level 3. So everyone who is currently in there right now, when we implement on December 21st, everyone was given a level 3 as their classification. And participants may step down one level at a time unless deemed necessary by the care team. And the care team, remember, is your care coordinator, your FTR administrator, and you as the probation officer. And peer support can contribute to that discussion too, if they have a peer support engaged with them. So we'll staff those cases and we can step them down one level at a time. So as you're looking over your cases in the next months, if you identify someone that you're like, this person's really doing well, I think they would be someone who we could probably step down. You could either have that conversation with the participant or their care coordinator can, and then we would staff it as a team and make that level change. So that's the third point there, is that we don't want it just the probation officer and the care coordinator discussing. We want the participants' input on this too. What do they think about changing the frequency or level of care that they're receiving from their care coordinator? Are they comfortable with that? Are they, what are their thoughts? Because the more ownership we can have from them and in their plan, their care plan, and the steps of that, the better engagement and the better success they're going to have. So once approved, the FTR administrator will document the level change within the Chronos and DocStars. So when we submit a level change, you will see it in DocStars. It'll say level change from 3 to 2, let's say, and it'll give just a brief reason or justification for that change. So if there's any questions, whatever, feel free to put them in the chat. Otherwise, I'll keep moving along here, but I want to make sure that we address any of those for you. So Heather, do you want to assist today, or you want me to just keep rolling? I know you've done a lot of training and stuff in the last week or two. So
Your call. Just keep going if you'd like to. I'm here listening.
All right. All right. Well, you can keep me in line and hit the taser button or whatever if I'm not articulating something in the right way. Well, we'll talk a little bit about level 3. On your screen, you'll see just this is just a brief snapshot of each level. As I mentioned, this is exactly what everyone is right now in Free Through Recovery until we make changes. And this is what everyone will come into Free Through Recovery in as a level 3. The objectives during that are that the care coordinator focuses on building rapport, referring for peer support, developing a care plan, and assessing the ongoing needs and progress. And then making referrals to community-based services and resources that are identified as a need for that participant. So also, many of you know that our expectation during that time is that the participant has an opportunity for weekly engagement with their care coordinator. And so that's one of the things we're looking for, is have they met with that participant or given the participant the opportunity to meet with them at least once a week. So this is one of the ways that we hold our care coordinators accountable to the level of care that they should be offering. That opportunity should be there for the participant. And it needs to be documented. If the participant doesn't show up or anything like that, we need to see that that's the reason it didn't happen, and that it wasn't just that our care coordinator didn't prioritize that. So a peer support person can also be meeting with the participant, and this counts as some of the weekly engagement that's happening. So the reimbursement rates are over there. You'll see there's some new things that are added, and you'll start seeing these in doc stars over on the outcomes page. One is ineligible. The first one there you see, that's 0. This is where we are when we're reconciling every month. Our administrators are looking to see that that expected level of service has been, offered by the provider, and if it has, then that provider is eligible. If not, then they are ineligible and will not receive any payment for that month. So it's some accountability that our administrators are providing to make sure that it is being offered to the participants. The second one there, that's called CC diligence but no engagement, is for the cases where, and you guys probably know this better than anyone, there are times where you're calling, you're doing your efforts, you've done everything on your side, and yet that participant is just MIA, and they're not calling back, they're not responding, whatever. So those would be ones where we call that CC diligence, but no engagement. Care coordinator has been diligent, but there's no engagement from the participant. And that's a change in this level system to add that kind of middle payment level, because we put that in there to make sure we're incentivizing the providers to do that work of reaching out and engaging with the participants. So the third one that you see listed is what we call engagement pay. This is where there's documentation that the care coordinator and peer support have had face-to-face opportunities or met with them at least weekly, and that they have less than 3 positive outcomes. So that's what we at times had called base pay. We've kind of renamed that to engagement pay. So as long as the participant's engaged and that care coordination is going on, then there's 400. And then the outcome pay is when we see that 3 out of 4 or 4 out of 4 positive outcomes. Okay. So level 3 is not really much of a change. That literally is what Freeze Recovery has been functioning as prior to December 21st. But now we have these other 2 levels. So I'll talk about level 2. Level 2 has some few different contact expectations, and the focus starts changing. You'll see the objective there is to connect a participant to long-term community-based services and support in order to assist with maintaining positive outcomes. So really what's happening there is maybe we've put out some of the immediate fires. They have a job, they have some housing, and they're following through with their treatment recommendations, they're meeting with you regularly. So some things are starting to go well. We really want that relationship to start to shift then with the care coordinator, where they're starting to look at how to connect them for long-term success. Sometimes what we've had a problem with is maybe a care coordinator is in there being a firefighter, helping put out these immediate fires and needs. And then once those are done, we don't see the development of the care plan anymore. And we're kind of going, let's keep walking here. We don't want to just move them out of crisis. We want to move them towards health and stability and maintaining those positive outcomes. And so their conversations and their care plans should start changing at that point. Looking at things like maybe not just a job that gave them a little bit of money, but is there a career where they're feeling successful in that and some of the goals that they want to meet. Maybe they're done with their intensive treatment, but now we're looking at what support groups and things like that do they have that will help maintain that. So these are some of the things that are offered or that the focus shifts to in that level 2. Okay, so you'll notice on the reimbursement level, there's some of it that's similar. The ineligible is if we basically see that the care coordinator has not offered the services that are meant to be offered at that point. And CC diligence drops a little bit. This is that case where the care coordinator has done their efforts, but maybe the participant has not shown or is not engaged. And then the big changes happen down there under engagement pay and outcome pay. Engagement pay is basically cut in half, and the outcome pay is less, down to the 280. And the reason for that is you'll notice that the contact standard is different. Instead of it being weekly that they're expected to be engaged and meet face-to-face, now that has dropped to at least once a month. So that has shifted, and the frequency and intensity of those care coordination meetings has lessened. And so that's the reason why the provider is receiving less reimbursement for those services. Okay. So you see a couple of questions there. What if a care coordinator cannot engage face-to-face with a participant? how is that going to affect either their payment? If they can't engage, then they need to document that. Otherwise, they'll be ineligible for payment. If we see that they did their due diligence but were unable, then if we can see that in the documentation, then we will pay them that CC diligence amount. So this will allow us to transition people towards, you could say, either discharge if they decided to, or at least towards lessening those services and walking with them long term, like in that 2-3 year window for their recovery support. Okay. Next one will be level 1, and then we'll kind of go through and ask some questions or talk a little bit about how people may move back and forth between these levels. Level 1 has got much less engagement expectations. You'll see there that the care coordinator will engage via phone call with the participant once during the reporting period to connect and assess collaboratively the need for continuing in level 1 or a higher level. In other words, how are they doing? How is the care plan still accurate? Are employment, housing, all those areas still stable and supportive of their recovery? And then reminding the participant that they are there, that they're kind of on speed dial for them if needed, and that the level can be changed immediately up to level 2 or 3. So if something happens, in other words, the person was doing well, but something happened, they lost their job and they're about to lose their apartment or something like that, then we can bump that right up to level 3 with a click of a button and re-engage the care coordinator to try to prevent some type of spiral or additional issues or charges to happen. So the level change can move. I mean, literally, if you as a probation officer, a lot of times you guys will identify or hear something or see some charges that happen and wheels are starting to fall off for that participant, please contact your FTR admin right away, because the care team can meet and literally just bump it right up to level 3 and get the intensity picked up to try to help that person immediately. So during this time, the peer support can continue to engage with the participant, and the key point there is to make sure that that line is open for those support services. You'll notice under the reimbursement rates that things change a little bit there. Ineligible stays the same. If the provider has not met the engagement standards, then they'll be ineligible. Engagement pay drops down to just $100 per month, because basically there's not as much face-to-face and man hours that they're committing to that at this point. It's just a contact, maybe via phone or video. And so the workload on them is a lot less for that. And then outcome pay is still the $80. If the person's doing well, then they still receive that $80 outcome pay. So that's kind of a brief overview of the different levels. And I guess one of the things I want to highlight and then open it up for questions is that you as probation officers are essential to, once again, just like you do in identifying the appropriate referrals, you're also essential in just the way that you're able to observe and bring to the care team your perspective on the case and how that participant's doing, because that'll greatly affect levels. Sometimes you maybe have been working, or your office has been working with a participant off and on over months or years, whereas that care coordinator does not know, the history or all these different things. And so you're going to have a lot of input that could help inform that care team discussion on what level of service you think would be appropriate. Okay. Any questions, or let's process for a while. Questions, comments, or Heather, Dr. Peterson, or other team members, if there's areas that I haven't clarified, need additional clarification on, let's discuss those.
While you were talking, Eric, I was just kind of thinking that a question some people might have is sort of like, why now, right? Like, why did we not design the program like this from the beginning? Because we definitely talked about it. So I just wanted to kind of take a minute and explain some of the different kinds of competing values, that we've been dealing with, because I think we've recognized throughout this process that part of Free Through Recovery's goal was to build workforce, because these were not services that necessarily existed in any kind of comprehensive way in North Dakota prior to Free Through Recovery. So that's part of it, kind of a slower rollout, in terms of the nuts and bolts of the program. The second piece is we've always wanted to incentivize wellness. So in some ways, this feels like a little bit of a shift away from that and more towards kind of your typical, fee-for-service model where people with more intense needs typically can, result in higher payments for the provider. And then also, in the past, we've avoided setting a lot of guidelines because we don't want people to get stuck in doing the minimum. So even now with the levels, like on level 2, maybe the minimum is once per month, but if there's a client who needs, twice per month or something like that, the expectation is still there that that's what the provider would do. Even for level 3, if somebody's really struggling and in crisis, they might need a phone call every day. So just because it's the minimum amount of contact doesn't mean that we won't be giving that feedback that, hey, this person's needs looked like they were a little bit more intense. So even though it's the minimum, in order to truly work from a person-centered model, you have to be willing to kind of do that extra piece when it's necessary. So those are some of the thought processes that we've had in the past that have maybe stopped us from doing something like this. But as we've worked with the program now for, it'll be 3 years on February 1st, we've noticed that, there is a large portion of clients who could probably benefit from a more intensive level of care. And then there's an equally large portion that could benefit from a less intensive or are only willing or able to engage, a couple times a month or once a month or whatever. So we did ultimately want to be responsive to that. And be as fiscally responsible as we possibly can, and so, we did decide to go this direction. But that's sort of some of the why now piece. I'm also always reminded of a specific case when we talk about the levels, because this is sort of what inspired it in my mind. I had worked with this guy in the prison. He was one of those guys, I think his LSI was like probably close to 40, if not over 40. He had spent his entire 20s in prison, typically on violent crimes, usually continued to be violent when he was in prison. Not a big fan of talking to staff, but for whatever reason, he just got pretty motivated towards the end of his stay. He had gotten to a place where he was doing pretty well. He hadn't been in ADSEG for a year or so, and he had identified that he was willing to participate in Free Through Recovery. So he was able to meet his care coordinator ahead of leaving prison. Luckily, we had a care coordinator, who was willing to work with him because his on paper information is a little tough to process sometimes. But anyway, so he had participated in the program for about 2 years, and he had done really well all 2 years. And I think it's probably close to, it'd be 3 years this spring, but he was ultimately discharged about 2 years in. But for his last probably year of participation, he really was only getting about monthly or 2 times per month calls from his care coordinator. So I found myself asking, what do we do with that, basically? Obviously, there's some benefit to him, right? Because he continues to engage. He's meeting all his outcomes. Not only is he not costing us over $100 a day to incarcerate, he's working, he's paying taxes, he's, renting his own place. So when you think about it, that $480 really isn't a huge amount. So we didn't want to necessarily push him to leave the program before he was ready. But it also really caused me to think about, okay, how do we, there's probably more people out there like him, right? So how do we manage these different kinds of needs? So I got on a spiel there a little bit. If anyone else has questions, please feel free to ask them. But I wanted to share a little bit more of some of the conversations that we've had and the different thought processes that have gone into the program design.
Yeah, I appreciate the highlighting of just all the different factors that contribute to this, because there is everything from how we oversee our providers and hold them accountable to appropriate levels of care. You guys know that you have some providers where it's not us holding them accountable. I mean, they're just in there doing a great job adjusting to whatever that participant needs, and make sure that you come in and appreciate those too, because there are some great providers out there that are doing incredible work. But it allows us to consider budget constraints compared to capacity. Like we want to use the funding well fiscally, because if there's someone that just wants kind of a safety net there, that's what kind of created this. Is there a way then that we can, bump the funding down so that we can justify keeping that safety net there and yet not turning away someone who has a 40 LSIR and is sitting there on a waiting list. So those were all considerations that we were having to make when these were created. And many of you contributed to that too. Some of you were talking about people who you were wondering because they were about to go off supervision. They're doing great. You had referred them to free to recovery a year plus ago, and you were kind of wondering, should we discharge them, whatever. So it was processing with many of you that kind of helped inform the creation of this. So Heather, did you have a thought? Or you?
Yeah, we also wanted to really emphasize the importance of engagement in free through recovery. And so we want people to really work hard at engaging participants. So not just making that call once every, 7 days to kind of meet that program requirement, but really, pursuing that engagement with those participants that they haven't been able to contact. And we all know there's kind of a healthy balance there of what that looks like. And so we've discussed that with our providers as well. But not pursuing engagement to meet our minimum requirements, but really to pursue engagement to connect and start engaging that participant in services. That was also another thought that we had in the creation of these levels. We didn't really talk about forward-facing communication with program participants either. One thing that we really want to emphasize is the importance of we don't feel that it's necessary to say to participants, oh, we're ready to bump you down a level, or, kind of that clinical frame of reference that most of us are very familiar with. This is more about engaging that person in what they need and how they feel or what their level of satisfaction and what they're currently receiving. And so most of us see that this is kind of a natural progression in like any relationship that our program participants have. And so for me, if I was a provider or a probation or parole officer, this would just be a natural discussion. It seems like naturally the last few months, you and I haven't had to connect as many times. You're really doing well. Would you be okay with us, meeting once a month in person versus us, working to try to schedule something every week, and so that's kind of how we've been training our providers to discuss this with program participants as well, because we don't want to have it become this, oh, I need to get down to level 1. That's the best, that's where people that are doing well are at, kind of that mentality around, substance abuse treatment. And so that's another thing that we do want to keep in mind when we're discussing this with our participants.
Thank you, Heather. Appreciate that
Yeah.
input too, especially with the way that it's presented. We've talked about that a little bit, that even, for those who have been involved with clinical, the idea of stepping down, sometimes when we hear moving down a level, that can almost sound like a negative. In the clinical world, that's a positive, and the fact that that means less services are needed. And so the way we present that to our participants can be key to help celebrate the progress that they've made.
I also know times of transition are when people I've worked with in the past get really nervous. So if they think that they're going to get dropped down a level, most participants know what that means in substance abuse treatment if they've had it, and so they know that their contact's going to be reduced. So we don't want to make them get nervous about the change in level, more about here's the natural thing that's happened in our relationship and what I'm noting. Are you noting this too? And kind of coming to that mutual agreement or understanding versus us telling them what they need.
We have clients, especially in facilities, who, and I don't know what it's like in the community if you guys see this too, but who will self-sabotage to stop transitions like that, like we would view as positive, right? Like it means you're doing well. But depending on kind of their personality makeup and, trauma history and that kind of thing, that can be a major trigger for, regression, I guess, relapse, that kind of thing. Because of what Heather just talked about with the support, the perception that the support is going to be removed.
It's good. And that's one of the reasons too why, to re-emphasize again that the thing that's going to trigger, or before this would level change would happen, that not just the care team has met, but that there is documented input from the participant. Like what is the participant feeling about? So we're not just triggering some type of feeling that we're pulling back from them and they haven't been involved in that process and that discussion. So, yeah. All right, are there any other questions or comments? I did see Scott threw in here about the copy of the PowerPoint presentation. Yeah, I'll attach or throw that in here just a moment. Or if you aren't able to pull it off of Teams or something, feel free to. We can email it out to the group and make sure that everyone has access to that. So, any other questions or comments before we wrap up and let you move on with your day? All right, well, feel free to reach out to any of us with questions. Your FTR administrators are going to be reconciling on the 21st, as you know, and they're going to be looking just kind of to see and reviewing a couple cases each month that may be appropriate for level change. So we just wanted to have you guys informed so that as you start getting those emails or phone calls from them wanting to staff a case and consider level change, you'd be informed on what all that involves. So thank you for all you do, and thank you for the impact that it's having statewide on all these participants that we're serving. And thank you for the input that you've given that has helped inform the development of Free Through Recovery. Have a great rest of your day. We'll talk to you next time.